Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlekauff to get notified when I go live. Hey, let's transition to college football. And the story of the weekend is easily Deion Sanders. And remarkable game. As I told Colin, that's why football's king. You can't fake that entertainment. I like a little more defense, but I'm not going to even pretend that wasn't incredible. That is why football's the number one television show. Doesn't get any better. And college football is the number 2 sport in America. Don't ever get that twisted. College football dominates rating-wise. There's a huge gap, as we talked about earlier, between the NFL and everyone else. College football's too. In that game, I haven't seen the numbers, but I would imagine they're huge. But Deion Sanders. I'll never forget when I worked for the Eagles. Our special teams coach was Bobby April. He's worked in the NFL, he's retired now. Worked in the NFL for decades. His son is currently the defensive coordinator for Stanford. Coached, lastly for Jim Leonard with Wisconsin as linebacker coach. Really good young defensive coach. But his dad was awesome. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And my role, when you work internally, maybe they've gotten bigger now, but most of these personnel departments aren't that big in-house. You got a lot of scouts on the road. So they give you a lot of different roles. And I used to help the special teams coach out, doing kind of stuff that the position coach doesn't want to do, right? Hang times, jot down numbers, who lines up where, a week in advance. Just make the process easier for him once we game plan on a weekly basis. And once you start doing that, you end up interacting with the guy a lot. And me and Bobby April used to talk all the time. And then even when I was in radio, he became the special teams coach for the Raiders. Talked to him a lot. And I'll never forget him telling me a story because I used to ask him about different coaches and different players. And he coached in the early 90s for the Atlanta Falcons, 91, 92, 93. So I used to ask him, what was it like coaching Deion Sanders? Because Deion Sanders at the time was one of the bright young stars in the league. This was before he went to the 49ers and the Cowboys and became Super Bowl champ, absolute legend. But he was easily one of, if not the most electric players in the league. And this is at the time when Deion was on TV, NFL Network. No one thought that he was going to become some college coach, right, at Colorado, let alone Jacksonville State, right? Jackson State, excuse me. But Bobby April used to tell me, he's like, the biggest misconception with Deion Sanders, because he's so loud, he's so cocky, and, let's face it, can rub people the wrong way, is he was easily one of my favorite players I've ever coached in my entire career. Not because he was great. Obviously, that's always fun, coaching great players, but because of how much he cared. And because of his work ethic. He said he'd always sit in the front of the meetings. He took incredible notes. He'd stay after at practice, and his practice habits were elite. And I would imagine if you just asked the casual fan, what do you think Deion Sanders' work ethic was as a player? I would imagine a lot of people, if you just did some poll, would be like, oh, Deion had so many God gifts. It was easy for him just to kind of cruise. Well, it turns out dude had like a Kobe Bryant maniacal desire to be great at football. It's why him and Michael Irvin are such good friends, right? When you just bring up Michael Irvin, who's currently getting sued, which feels like bullshit, but his history as a player, hookers, blow, a lot of crazy stuff. You ask anyone, and I've been lucky enough to be around people that have played with Michael Irvin, his work ethic and practice, elite. You usually don't get great at anything, whether it's football, whether it's radio, whether it's real estate, whether it's construction, if your work ethic isn't top notch. That's typically how you separate. Most people aren't just naturally gifted to the nth degree at a very competitive industry just to maintain that. You have to be a grinder, and you got to be usually pretty passionate about what you're doing. And the way he described Deion Sanders to me was just the ultimate football guy. Like the way when we describe Brady, or we describe Peyton Manning, or we describe Ray Lewis, or now some of the great young players in the league, right? They just love football. They're junkies. They study it nonstop. They're obsessed. That was Deion Sanders as a player. So when you look at him as a coach, there was a moment in that game against TCU that really jumped out to me. There was a player down. I forget. I think it was a TCU guy. And Deion Sanders had come out to talk to the player on the ground. And Sonny Dykes was there as well. And the game was well in the balance, third quarter, tight game. I forget, Colorado might have even had the lead at the time. Obviously, TCU came back. It was a back-and-forth game. And Sonny Dykes, who was just literally in the national championship, Deion kind of hugs him, and you could tell they're talking. Sonny Dykes, and I've met him a couple times when he was the coach at Cal, is just an old school Texas football guy. His dad was a coach. He's a coach. Just when you see Sonny Dykes, when you talk to Sonny Dykes is just football. Deion can relate to football guys. Why? He's an old school football guy. This offseason, definitely in training camp, but I'm pretty sure they did in spring ball as well. Most of these teams, right, in college football and definitely in the pros, there is no tackling to the ground. When you scrimmage in the NFL and at even all the Power 5 schools, they are doing what's equivalent like thud. And what thud is like the padded version of two-hand touch. You kind of hit, but there's no wrapping up. You kind of tap him, and the guy keeps moving. It's why if you've never been to a NFL practice, if you've watched NFL Network, there'll be clips of kind of guys colliding in practice, and then the running back or the wide receiver or the tight end just keeps on running because you're not tackling the guy to the ground, right? Well, Deion Sanders tackled to the ground. I think we look at Deion Sanders as like this progressive, young, hip coach, and obviously when it comes to recruiting, he's got a lot of that. Think who taught him, one of the truly great recruiters in the history of sport, Bobby Bowden. That's where he learned from when he played as, at Florida State back in the late 80s. So Deion and his personality, he was going to be a natural recruiter. But I think people looked at him like, corner. One of the things Deion used to say, like, they don't pay me to tackle. I don't even blame him. He's right. They pay him to cover. But like when I watch Deion Sanders, he actually relates and has much more in common with Belichick and Saban in terms of the way he views football. Now, obviously, the way they play, they don't have Georgia, LSU, Florida State's personnel on defense. So for them to be successful, they're going to have to score points. But I've always said this about Lincoln Riley. I question his ethos and his belief how important recruiting defensive players were. I watched USC when they were great. That was in my football-loving college life. And I watched a team full of NFL players at every fucking position, D-line, linebacker, and DB, for almost a decade with Pete Carroll. That's what it takes to win natties. No one else has won a national championship out west because the defense is always a question mark. Deion will value that. I promise you that, right? But the other thing with Deion, when you view him as like this outspoken, I think on social media, he feels very 2023. When it comes to football, he has much more in common with like 1993. And I'll promise you this. If you've watched the clips of him addressing the team, he's got that down pat. And two other things really stand out to me. To be a great head coach, when you are like, he's not going to be one of the coordinators. Obviously, if he was, he'd be the defensive coordinator, but he's going to be a CEO head coach. Think John Harbaugh, think Mike Tomlin, think now Nick Saban. But when you are that, you have to hire really well. It's very incumbent on you to hire the right guys. Well, he got last year the Kent State head coach, left that job to become his OC. And there were multiple plays in that game. One was in the red zone that led to a touchdown, and another on like a 3rd and 5 that was like, this guy's really scheming it up. Obviously, there were some plays with Shedeur and Travis Hunter where there was just some like, hey, our Jimmies and the Joes are going to beat your Jimmies and the Joes. And that's a huge part of college football. For as great as Saban is, for as great as Kirby Smart is, for as great as that scumbag phony Urban Meyer is, they've always had the great Jimmies and the Joes, as well as their X's and the O's. And when they get to the biggest moments, they got the better players. So that's a huge part of college football. This is not the NFL. But you still need to be able to scheme. You still need to be able to dial it up. And right now, I watched Deion Sanders, offensive coordinator. What a hire. And that's happening a lot more now. Like I said, Bo Baldwin, this guy used to be the offensive coordinator and head coach at Eastern Washington, became the head coach at Cal Poly, left that job to become the offensive coordinator at Arizona State because it's easier for that guy to get a Power 5 job, not through a smaller school, but being the OC at a bigger school. And the other thing is Deion knows talent. Like Deion knows talent. I would imagine anyone could recruit Travis Hunter, right? I'm not giving him credit for that. You deserve credit for establishing the relationship, but every team that's worth their salt in the country, Clemson, Florida State, Bama, Georgia, you name it, wanted that guy. But I watched a bunch of other guys. They had a second wide receiver, number 10, the little running back that Deion's known forever. Obviously, the million dudes they've landed in the transfer portal. Like Deion and his crew can identify players. They deserve a lot of credit for that. And this whole business now with this transfer portal evaluation, like landing a guy from a smaller school, bringing over a guy, like the one thing that I thought was kind of stupid, and I get why they're saying it, but Deion and Shedeur acting like, I was just at the HBCU. I'm an HBCU player. It's like, go Google Shedeur's rival.com. Obviously, he was going to go play for his dad. He would have gone to the SEC or Florida State. Like, those are the schools that were sniffing around. Now, he's clearly better. Anyone that says, like, I knew he was going to be this, I watched a lot of Jackson State BS. People were not watching Jackson State. I'm not saying people didn't. I watched last year their conference championship game. But on the whole, we just don't consume that level of football. That's just a fact. We've all seen the ratings. Right? Now, you also didn't know how it was going to look once he got to this level, and he was remarkable. And Travis Hunter playing 7 million plays in that game. Those two guys. This other notion, and we'll get into Florida State here in a second, Colorado was never going to win the national championship. Definitely not this year. Because to win a national championship, you have to play defense. It's the only way possible. You got to be able to tackle. You got to be able to rush the passer. And most of the schools in the country, that includes all the conferences, SEC as well, are not great defenses, right? Think of who's good at defense in this country. Georgia, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin has been with Jim Leonhard. Iowa's had some teams. Florida State. You just kind of go around, right? But you can win 8 to 10 games, depending on your schedule, if your defense is average at best. Honestly, a little below average if your offense is elite. Look at TCU. They made the national championship last year because they could score points. And TCU is still going to win a bunch of games because they can score points. So do I view Colorado as like some playoff contender? I know. But do I view them as a team that could win 9 games? Is it going to be hard for them to physically handle Utah and Oregon? 100%. But can they beat the overwhelming and even USC? But can they beat the other teams? For sure. I mean, I expect them to win this week by probably like 10, 15 points. Because you'd be like, well, kind of a letdown spot to Nebraska. Boulder, Colorado is going to look like fucking LSU at night, even though it's a 10 a.m. kickoff play. It's going to be bananas because of Prime. Prime is what we call in business a cash cow. Jim Harbaugh's that. Saban's that. Kirby Smart's now that. Belichick was that for 20 years. Andy Reid is that. Pete Carroll's been that way for Seattle. Kyle Shanahan's that way for Jed York, Sean McVay. Like, that is a cash cow. Deion's a winner, and winners find ways to win. And I think anyone that thinks he's new school, yeah, he has some new school identity to him with how active he is on social media. But his message, if you watch him talk to his team, and if you watch the clips of him practicing, is very old school. Florida State. When I was a GA at Fresno State, we had a young student assistant who had tried out for kicker, and the coach said, listen, you're not going to be able to be our kicker, but we would love to have you on the staff. And his name was Derek Ray. And he went on to be working recruiting and end up going to Oregon State for years, most recently with Jonathan Smith, had become a really, really highly thought of recruiting coordinator in college football, was turning down quote unquote bigger jobs. He loved Jonathan Smith. So do I. Dude's a stud. Dude made DJ Ungole look good. Well, last year, the Florida State Seminoles offered him the job to be the GM, and he took it. And this is a guy from the Central Valley, Fresno State, Oregon State, went to Florida State. And I talked to him on the phone a couple weeks ago. I've known him now almost 15 years. And he's like, bro, 2 things. We're fucking good. Like, we have a squad. These receivers and this receiver we land in the transfer portal is the real deal. And he's like, our head coach, who's also our play caller, is big time. Him as a play caller, just watching him last year and watching him in practice, this guy's no joke. And that was on full display. He wasn't lying to me. And I didn't think he was lying, but you never know. Big game, LSU, coin flip game. That was a clinic. And to me, what really stood out, like Derek told me, their personnel is big time. They got NFL players like LSU everywhere. And that play caller was really, really impressive. Because part of college football is a Jimmy's and the Joes matchup, just like the NFL. But in the NFL, there's much smaller gap between talent on opposite sides of the field. Obviously, you have a Micah Parsons or a Trent Williams. I'm not saying there are certain guys, but as a whole, as a unit, There were clear deficiencies last night, and Norvell took clear advantage of them. And I think Florida State, that game, like, listen, I love TCU, Colorado. Like, I was glued to my couch for whatever, 3.5, 4 hours. Sunday night's really more my style. Like, I like watching NFL players on defense flying around, crushing people. Herb Street was even mentioning it last night. People were getting crushed, absolutely mollywopped. I like that. And you just see the body types, like, that guy's an NFL player, that guy's an NFL player. But I think Florida State, they got a real squad. LSU will be fine. They'll win their 9-10 games. But Florida State can win the national championship. They just got to get by Clemson. They're now in the driver's seat. And anyone, if by the time you're listening to this, that doesn't put them number 2 overall, I got no problem leaving Georgia till they lose number 1. Back-to-back champs, they've earned it. But if you just watch college football over the last 3-4 days, how anyone can say Florida State today, that doesn't mean it can't change, is not the second best team in the country, is on some drugs that I'd probably like to get a hold of because they're pretty powerful. Couple other things. I didn't really get the chance. I saw Colin open with this. He had texted some NFL executives and scouts about Shedeur, and you can't watch Shedeur and not think, obviously, not just an NFL player, but like, is this a top 5 pick? I mean, shit, if Trey Lance and Zach Wilson go 2 and 3, Shedeur could play one game and that could be his game, and he could easily go top 5 in the draft. But the college quarterback play is elite. I mean, it just is. It is fantastic. And the number one thing that stood out to me, there are so many random players, quarterbacks all over the NFL. They're like, how's this guy still in the NFL? How did Matt Barkley last this long? How did this guy last this long? There's a lot of fat about to be trimmed. I mean, there are so many quarterbacks. And I texted a college director. I said, how many quarterbacks do you think are going to get drafted in the top 50 in this draft? He's like, I don't know, 6, 7. I'm like, what about just the quarterback class as a whole? Even underclassmen that aren't draft eligible. He's like, absolutely loaded. Every other game has an NFL quarterback. And not all of them are going to be first-round picks, but you're talking second, third, fourth round. Listen, we can nitpick Jaden Daniels all we want, the LSU quarterback. Like, that's a draftable player. Same with Florida State's quarterback. These are draftable quarterbacks, let alone the Drake Mays, the Caleb Williams, you name it. Michael Penix, to me, throws as beautiful a ball as any quarterback, college or pro. It is, honestly, I'm going to pick Washington to win the conference. I think Washington will win the Pac-12. Oregon, I'm not betting on USC. I'm just not. They don't have the defense. Oregon might be as good. Obviously, they played an incredible game. I got to see them play a real opponent. But, I mean, Oregon-Washington's going to be a fantastic game. A lot of people love Bo Nix. And I'll never forget Andy Reid told me years ago when they were evaluating Patrick Mahomes. I was like, was it difficult to evaluate a quarterback in kind of this spread soft offense? He's like, no, it actually made it much easier. I just removed every quick screen he had, and he just had more evidence and more inventory of short, intermediate, and deep throws than most quarterbacks in the history of my job because of the amount these guys throw. And that speaks to all these quarterbacks now. They're just throwing more, and that starts with high school. I've been saying this forever. In 2001, 2, 3, when I was in high school, we ran the wing T. And this was in Sacramento, a pretty big recruiting hotbed. It's not quite, I would say LA or the Central Valley, but it's got a lot of Division I players that play Power 5 football. And I would say a large percentage of teams ran some version of the wing T, of the option, of the veer. And now if you just look, and I follow high school football in Sacramento relatively closely, they're all running spread offenses. They're all throwing it, and that speaks to all over the country now. So all these top quarterbacks are used to throwing the ball in high school. And then they get to college where when I was a kid, even if you threw the ball in high school, once you got to college, you usually played in a running offense. Well, those days are over. It's all spread it out and slinging around. So the amount of sweet quarterbacks makes college football really easy to watch because it's just fun. Like it's just an exciting game. And it's also fun, even if you listen, when I lived in Philly, there was a big Penn State contingent, but Philly, Boston, New York, the Northeast leans much more NFL. Obviously, the South leans much more college football. And while we like college football in the West, I know I do, it's much more pro football, right? The 49ers, now the Rams, the Chargers, Seattle's good now. Bigger than college football. Even SC, when they're good, they're the only team, and we'll see if their importance has dropped a little bit because of the NFL teams in Los Angeles. But my overall point is, that the talent at that position is stupid. And some of these random quarterbacks that have been hanging on by a thread in the NFL, they're about to get booted because there are just going to be so many guys drafted, even teams with starting quarterbacks like a Dak Prescott, like a Kirk Cousins, like just go around the league with some of the middle of tier guys. I'm just going to be drafting quarterbacks in the third, fourth round who are really good. And that's exciting. And that's means there's a healthiness for the league when there's a lot of quarterback play, at least a high level. And we know a lot of these guys aren't going to turn into good play. I'm not acting like these guys are all going to be stars, because even between Caleb and Drake Maye, the likelihood that both are Pro Bowlers, history would tell us that's not the case, even though it's like, God, I watched both of them. Penix as well. Now, Penix has an injury history. Those three players are just elite. I mean, Caleb's remarkable. Drake Maye, I thought, looked awesome the other night. And Penix, I just typed him into Twitter the other night, like the day after his game, just because I wanted to watch a couple of his throws, just because it's so beautiful coming. There's something special about a nice, soft touch from a lefty. But really enjoyed, and you should too. I mean, if you're just flipping around, I mean, the amount of high level quarterback play is just, it's jaw dropping. And last but not least, I would say over my life, I'm 37, 38, I'm about to be 39. I'm getting old. I've become much less emotional. Doesn't mean that I can't be moved emotionally, or when I think of things about my parents, or, you know, I see something on the internet that's heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, or moving, that I wouldn't shed a tear. But for the most part, I've developed some calluses, and it's not always the healthiest thing. And it honestly might be a Middlekauff trait. I know my brother's a lot like that. Told the story when we were in Tahoe a couple weeks ago about something crazy that happened on the ranch, and a guy almost died, and it was like, didn't even phase him. Middlekauffs, we can be, our emotions are just, we kind of struggle with it sometimes. We don't know exactly what to do. Didn't exactly have the most vulnerable upbringing in terms of just talking about our feelings. Not, I was raised in an old school home. But I was watching the Pac-12 over the weekend, and they obviously did not lose a game. Pretty incredible start for a conference that's literally about to die. The conference is going away forever. And I've said, I'm not as aggressive as Coward of like, this is just inevitable. Like, obviously, it's great for the networks. It's great to have Michigan playing Washington and Oregon playing Wisconsin and Ohio State. I get it. I get it from financial standpoint. And I'm as pro-business as anyone easily that talks about sports. You will not find anyone who not only understands it, but celebrates it. I'm pro-money here. That doesn't mean that watching it this weekend and watching the Pac-12, which is probably going to have their deepest league in fucking forever. I mean, they have potentially 4 teams that could compete to make the playoffs: Oregon, Washington, USC, and Utah. I do feel pretty confident that they will get a playoff team. Like right now, if I was a betting man, I will say the Pac-12 would be represented in the playoffs. What Deion Sanders is doing with Shedeur and Travis Hunter, the Arizona schools, especially University of Arizona, looks really good. Oregon State is really good. I mean, they're going to be an 8-4, 9-3 team that you want no part of. Washington State has an NFL quarterback. Cal and Stanford actually, had a good start, especially Cal, for a program that doesn't care about sports. Not the coaches or the players, but the administration. Kind of made me sad. And honestly, I was thinking about it on Sunday night. Like, it sucks. It really does. It's over. And I'm not hoping that it ever come. I understand that there's no looking back. Somehow Stanford and Cal are now in the ACC. And I tweeted this, and I believe this to my core. If you think that Clemson and Florida State and North Carolina, who all voted against adding them, are ever playing a game in the Bay Area, you're high on something, because I can't ever see that happening. People are like, Middlekauff, they're in the conference. Like, yeah, for how long? 1 and 2, I don't see it. But regardless, like, for all the expansion, I understand why the networks want it. I understand why every week 1 game should be Colorado, TCU, LSU, Florida State. We should not have Oregon playing Portland State. That's an embarrassment. That should not happen. I don't blame them for doing it, because those are the current rules. But that needs to die. And as these conferences dissipate and they all go under one umbrella eventually, we will just get, every game will be Alabama, Texas, or Ole Miss, Washington, or just whatever. They'll just be bigger games against Power 5 opponents. Even the non-Power 5, like You can play Boise State, Fresno State, some of those schools as well, but you should never be able to play D1 AA teams. Like those days not only need to die, I'm pretty confident they will. But if you're of a certain age, it is going to suck not having these traditional rivalries and just having them die. Like I think it's cool that now with Texas going back to the SEC, that you'll get Texas and Texas A&M again. You should. But there was something cool about like Texas, Kansas State or Texas, Texas Tech when they would lose that game sometime. And it would make that program season. Or when Oregon State last year takes down USC, or almost does, or a couple years ago they did. And it's a huge feather in that team's cap. And those days feel kind of over. And regionally, at least, for us out west. And that sucks. And it truly makes me sad. Not sad enough to cry, but I do understand the people on the other end that say this is all about money. It is, because football pays for everything. As you've seen with the destruction of like the Big East, why did it get destroyed? Because football was the cash cow, not basketball, even though basketball is a profitable venture. But football makes so much more that the basketball programs, especially the basketball programs that don't have football or don't have a powerful football program, were viewed as an afterthought. And I don't really know what else to say beside that. I hope the Pac-12 has just an incredible year. I hope this doesn't slow down. Obviously, it's impossible to not lose a game because you eventually play each other, but keeps kicking ass and taking names. And it's going to be weird next year when we see it, even if that means more entertaining games, and it surely does. But for those of us that grew up loving football on Saturdays out west, it was hard not to get a little sad with the success that the conference really had over the first 3 or 4 days of the season.